Story 1. Watcher in Cabin 7. I found the cabin on my third day hiking the Blue Ridge Trail in Virginia. It was October 2019, and I'd been planning this solo trip for months. The cabin wasn't on any map I had, but it looked abandoned, perfect shelter from the rain that had been following me for 2 days. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was covered in dust, except for one thing: a notebook on the kitchen table. The pages were filled with entries, all in different handwriting. Dates going back to 2003, all from people like me who'd found this place and decided to stay the night. But it was the most recent entry that made my blood run cold. It was dated just 2 days ago. Someone's been watching me since I got here. Haven't seen them, but I can feel eyes on me through the windows. Found footprints around the cabin this morning, size 12 boots. I'm leaving at first light. I should have left right then. Instead, I decided to stay. Big mistake. The cabin had 2 bedrooms and a main room with a stone fireplace. I set up my sleeping bag in the back bedroom, away from the windows. As night fell, I built a small fire and made dinner. That's when I heard it for the first time: footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps circling the cabin. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the window. Nothing but darkness and trees. The footsteps stopped. I convinced myself it was an animal. Deer, maybe. But animals don't walk in perfect circles around buildings for 20 minutes straight. Around midnight, I heard scratching at the windows. Not random scratching. It was rhythmic. 3 short scratches, pause, 3 more, like someone was tapping out Morse code with their fingernails. I lay in my sleeping bag, heart pounding, trying to figure out what to do. The scratching moved from window to window. Front of the cabin, then the side, then the back bedroom where I was hiding. Each window got the same treatment. 3 scratches, pause, 3 more, then it stopped. Complete silence for maybe 10 minutes. I started to relax, thinking whoever it was had given up. That's when I heard the front door creak open. I held my breath. The floorboards in the main room groaned under someone's weight. Slow, careful steps moving toward the back of the cabin. Toward my room, the footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I could see a shadow blocking the light that came under the door from the dying fire. Someone was standing there, listening. I had 2 choices: confront whoever it was, or hope they'd go away. I chose wrong again. I stayed quiet and waited. The door handle turned. Slowly, the door opened just a crack, and I saw part of a face peering in. Wild hair, sunken eyes, and a smell that hit me like a punch to the gut. Unwashed body, rotting teeth, and something else I couldn't identify. The person, I still don't know if it was a man or woman, stared at me for what felt like hours. I pretended to be asleep, but my whole body was shaking. They knew I was awake. Finally, they closed the door and walked away. I heard them moving around the main room, opening cabinets, going through my backpack, taking things. Then the front door opened and closed again. I waited until sunrise to come out of that bedroom. My food was gone, my water bottles empty. But they'd left something behind. Muddy footprints all over the floor, and a new entry in the notebook. Cabin 7 has a new friend. Hope he likes sharing. I packed up and got out of there as fast as I could. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. I looked up property records when I got home. There is no Cabin 7 on the Blue Ridge Trail. According to the county, that area is completely undeveloped forest. I've never been back to that part of Virginia. But sometimes, when I'm camping alone, I wake up in the middle of the night and think I hear those 3 scratches on my tent wall. And I wonder if whoever lives in that cabin is still out there, still watching, still waiting for the next person to find their way to a place that doesn't exist. Since then, I always research the history of where I'm camping. And I never ever stay in abandoned buildings. Some places are abandoned for a reason. Story 2. The Parallel Trail. This happened in West Virginia, near the Red River Gorge, summer of 2020. I was hiking the Endless Wall Trail with my buddy Jake. It's supposed to be a simple 3-mile loop, popular with families. We'd done it before, without any problems. But that day, something was different. About halfway through the hike, we noticed another trail branching off to our right. It wasn't marked on our map, and neither of us remembered seeing it on previous hikes. Jake wanted to check it out. I said we should stick to the main trail. He convinced me by promising we'd only go a few hundred yards to see where it led. The unmarked trail ran parallel to the main one, maybe 50 feet away through the trees. We could still hear other hikers on the main trail talking and laughing. It felt safe enough. After 10 minutes of walking, Jake stopped dead in his tracks. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I listened. From the main trail, I could hear voices, but they weren't normal hiking chatter. Someone was having the exact same conversation we'd had 20 minutes ago about whether to take the unmarked trail. We crept closer to the edge of our trail and looked through the trees. Two guys were standing where we'd been standing, having our conversation word for word. One wanted to explore, one wanted to stick to the main trail. But here's what made my skin crawl. They looked exactly like us. Same clothes, same backpacks, same everything. Like we were looking at ourselves from 20 minutes in the past. Jake grabbed my arm. "We need to get back to the main trail." Now, we turned around, but the trail behind us was gone, just dense forest. We searched for 20 minutes, but there was no way back. The only option was to keep following the parallel trail and hope it connected with the main one eventually. As we walked, we kept hearing conversations from the main trail. But they were all conversations Jake and I had already had during previous hikes in this area. Our discussion about which restaurant to hit after the hike, my complaint about my boots rubbing my heel, Jake's story about his ex-girlfriend that he'd told me 6 months ago on a different mountain entirely. It was like someone was playing back recordings of our past conversations, but they were coming from people who looked like us walking on a trail 50 feet away. We hiked for 3 hours. The parallel trail never connected with the main one. It just kept going deeper into the forest, farther from where we'd parked the car. And the whole time, we could hear our own voices coming from the trees to our left. The sun started setting, and we were completely lost. That's when we heard something that made us both freeze. From the main trail came the sound of our current conversation, the one we were having right then about being lost and scared. Jake looked at me with terror in his eyes. "If our current conversation is happening over there, what does that mean for us over here?" We decided to make noise to see if the people on the main trail would respond. Jake yelled, "Hello," as loud as he could. From the main trail, we heard Jake's voice yelling, "Hello." Back, I shouted, "We're over here." My voice echoed back from the trees. "We're over here." But when we looked through the forest toward the main trail, we saw 2 figures walking away from us. They looked like us, but they were walking in the wrong direction, away from the parking area, deeper into the woods. We followed them, crashing through the underbrush, trying to catch up. But every time we got close, they seemed to get farther away, and their voices kept getting fainter, but they were still having our conversations. Finally, Jake had an idea. What if we stopped talking? What if we just stay completely quiet? We walked in silence for 10 minutes. The voices from the main trail went quiet too. That's when we saw it. A sign for the Endless Wall Trail main loop, pointing back toward the parking area. We'd somehow found our way back to the marked trail. We practically ran back to the car. The whole drive home, we barely said a word to each other. But that night, Jake called me. "I looked up that area online," he said. "There have been reports for years of hikers finding unmarked trails near the Endless Wall. But here's the weird part. People say they hear their own conversations coming from the woods, and some of them never made it back to their cars. We've never hiked that trail again, and whenever we go camping now, we stick to the marked paths, no matter what we see or hear in the woods around us." Story 3. The Night Shift. I work as a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains, Tennessee side. Most of my shifts are during the day, dealing with tourists and maintaining trails. But twice a month, I pull the overnight shift, patrolling the backcountry areas where the serious campers go. It was September 2021, around 2 a.m., when I got the call on my radio. A camper at Site B47 reported hearing screaming coming from the woods. Not animal screaming, human screaming. Site B47 is about 4 miles from the nearest road, accessible only by a narrow hiking trail. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out in the ranger truck as far as I could go, then continued on foot. The camper who called it in was a middle-aged guy named Tom. He'd set up his tent near a creek about 100 yards from the designated camping spot. When I found him, he was sitting by his fire, fully dressed, wide awake. Started around midnight, he told me. Someone screaming for help, maybe half a mile upstream. Went on for about 10 minutes, then stopped completely. I asked why he hadn't gone to investigate himself. He gave me a look I'll never forget, because the screaming was coming from above me. I didn't understand what he meant until he pointed up. About 30 feet above the creek, the rock face formed a narrow ledge. It would be impossible for someone to be up there without climbing gear, especially in the dark. You sure about that? I asked. Tom nodded. I've been camping for 20 years. I know what direction sound comes from. I called it in to headquarters and requested backup. My supervisor told me the nearest available ranger was 2 hours away. I could wait. Or I could investigate alone. The screaming had stopped, but someone might still need help. I decided to explore the area upstream. Tom offered to come with me, and honestly, I was grateful for the company. We followed the creek for about half a mile, using our flashlights to scan both sides of the water. That's when we found the camp, 2 tents, side by side, both zipped up tight. A fire pit with cold ashes, backpacks hanging from tree branches to keep them away from bears. But no people anywhere. I called out, identifying myself as a park ranger. No response. I approached the first tent and listened. Nothing. I unzipped it carefully and shined my light inside. The tent was set up for 2 people, 2 sleeping bags, personal items scattered around, but it was empty. Same thing with the second tent, set up for 1 person, but no one inside. Tom and I looked at each other. Maybe they went night hiking? He suggested. But all their gear was still here. Food, clothes, even their boots were lined up outside the tents. Who goes hiking barefoot in the middle of the night? I was about to radio headquarters when we heard it. A voice calling from above us. Down here! We're down here! Tom grabbed my arm. That's coming from the ledge again. I looked up and saw nothing but rock face and darkness. But the voice was definitely coming from somewhere above us. Where are you? I shouted back. We fell. Can't get back up. The voice was clearer now. A woman, maybe in her 30s. She sounded hurt and scared. I radioed for a rescue team and explained the situation. They said they'd be there in 4 hours, had to bring special climbing equipment. While we waited, I tried to establish more communication with whoever was up there, but every time I called out, the response came from a different location along the ledge, first from directly overhead, then from 50 feet upstream, then back to where we started. Tom noticed it too. How are they moving around up there? He whispered. Around 4 a.m., the rescue team arrived with ropes and climbing gear, 3 experienced climbers who knew the area better than anyone. They rappelled down from the top of the rock face while I waited below with Tom. 20 minutes later, the lead climber's voice came through my radio. There's nobody up here. No sign anyone's ever been up here. The ledge is only about 6 inches wide. You couldn't stand on it, let alone move around. But as he was saying that, we heard the woman's voice again. Please don't leave us. The climber heard it too. That's coming from below me, he radioed. But I'm looking right at you guys. We spent the rest of the night searching every inch of that area. The abandoned camp, the creek, the woods on both sides. Never found any trace of the people who'd been calling for help. When daylight came, we made a disturbing discovery. The boots outside the abandoned tents were filled with creek water and leaves, like they'd been sitting there for weeks. But the campsites were registered for that weekend. The people were supposed to be there. I filed my report, but there was no follow-up investigation. The official position was that the registered campers never showed up, and Tom and I had experienced some kind of audio hallucination caused by wind patterns in the rock formation. But I know what we heard. And I know those voices were real. Since that night, I refuse to work the overnight shift alone, and whenever I have to patrol that area, I do it during daylight hours only. Some things in these mountains don't want to be found. Story 4. The Lost Colony. In the summer of 2018, I discovered something in the hills of eastern Kentucky that still haunts me. I was doing a solo backpacking trip along the Red River Gorge, exploring some of the more remote areas that don't see many visitors. On my second day, I took a wrong turn somewhere and ended up on what I thought was an old logging road. It was overgrown but still passable, so I followed it deeper into the mountains, figuring it would eventually connect with one of the marked trails. After about 3 miles, I came across something I wasn't expecting, a small settlement of maybe 8 or 9 buildings. They looked like they'd been built in the 1800s, but were in surprisingly good condition. No power lines, no modern conveniences visible, but the structures were solid and well-maintained. What struck me as odd was how quiet it was. Most abandoned places have some signs of wildlife or wind moving through broken windows. This place was dead silent. I approached the largest building, which looked like it might have been a general store or meeting hall. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, but it was clearly still in use. Shelves stocked with canned goods, tools hanging on the walls, even a wood-burning stove that had been used recently. On a table near the back, I found a ledger book. The entries were all handwritten, documenting trades and transactions between families with names I didn't recognize. The most recent entry was dated just 3 days before I arrived. Traded 2 chickens to the Moors for winter clothes. Sarah's cough getting worse. Need to find more medicine. I was looking through the ledger when I heard voices outside, multiple people talking, getting closer. I quickly put the book back and headed for the door, planning to introduce myself and apologize for trespassing. But when I stepped outside, the settlement was empty again. No people, just silence. I explored a few more buildings. Each one showed signs of recent habitation, beds with rumpled blankets, dishes in sinks, food in pantries. But no people anywhere. In what looked like a schoolhouse, I found children's drawings pinned to the walls. Crude pictures of families and animals, signed with names and ages. Mary, age 8. Joseph, age 6. The drawings looked fresh, like they'd been made recently. That's when I noticed something disturbing about the pictures. They all showed the same thing. Families standing together in front of the settlement buildings. But in every single drawing, there were adults and children with normal faces, and then one figure in each family group with their face scribbled out completely. Black crayon covering where the face should be. I was studying the drawings when I heard a child's laughter coming from outside. I went to the window and saw a little girl, maybe 7 years old, playing by herself near one of the houses. She was wearing a simple dress that looked homemade and had long brown hair. I waved at her through the window. She looked directly at me and waved back, then beckoned for me to come outside. When I got to the door, she was gone. But I could hear her calling my name, which was impossible since I hadn't told anyone my name. "David," she called in a sing-song voice. "Come play with us, David." The voice was coming from different directions. First from behind one house, then from the other side of the settlement, then from the woods beyond. But I never saw her again. I decided it was time to leave. But when I tried to find the logging road I'd followed to get there, it was gone. The forest had somehow closed in around the settlement. No road, no path, just dense trees and undergrowth. I spent the next 4 hours trying to find a way out. Every time I thought I'd found a trail, it would disappear after a few hundred feet. It was like the settlement was surrounded by an invisible barrier that I couldn't cross. As the sun started setting, I began to panic. I was considering spending the night when I heard adult voices coming from the buildings behind me, not calling to me, just normal conversation, like people going about their evening routines. I turned around, and the settlement was alive. Smoke rising from chimneys, lights in windows, people moving between buildings. A normal-looking community, settling in for the night. But when I tried to approach, to ask for help finding my way out, they all stopped what they were doing and stared at me. Men, women, children. Maybe 30 people total, all standing perfectly still, looking in my direction. None of them had faces. Where their features should have been, there was just smooth, blank skin. I ran. Crashed through the trees, branches tearing at my clothes and backpack. After what felt like hours, I finally found a marked trail. Made it back to my car just before dawn. I tried to find that settlement again 6 months later, brought GPS coordinates and everything. But the logging road was completely grown over, like it hadn't been used in decades. And according to county records, there's never been any settlement in that area. But I still have one of those children's drawings. It fell out of my backpack when I was unpacking at home, and the face that's scribbled out in black crayon, it looks exactly like my face. Story 5. The Sound Barrier. This story happened in North Carolina, in the Pisgah National Forest, October 2020. I was camping with my girlfriend Sarah at a backcountry site about 6 miles from the nearest road. We'd been planning this trip for months. 4 days of hiking, fishing, and getting away from everything. The first 2 days were perfect. Great weather, beautiful scenery, no problems at all. But on the third night, something changed. We were sitting by our campfire around 9 p.m. when all the normal forest sounds just stopped. No insects, no owls, no wind in the trees. Complete silence, like someone had flipped a switch. Sarah noticed it first. "It's too quiet," she whispered. I was about to agree when we heard it. A low humming sound coming from deep in the forest. Not mechanical, not animal, something else entirely. The humming got louder and seemed to be moving around us in a circle. We sat perfectly still, listening. It would get close enough that we could feel it vibrating in our chests, then move away again. "Should we put out the fire?" Sarah asked. I was about to say yes when the humming stopped, but the silence that followed was even worse than the sound itself. We decided to go to bed early. Our tent was a 2-person backpacking model, small but reliable. We zipped ourselves in and tried to get some sleep. Around midnight, Sarah shook me awake. "Listen," she breathed. Someone was talking outside our tent. A man's voice, having a normal conversation. But we could only hear one side of it. "Yeah, I see them. 2 of them. They're asleep, I think." "No, just the tent, no vehicle." Sarah and I held hands in the darkness, afraid to move or make any noise. "Should be easy enough. Wait until they're really deep asleep." "Yeah, I brought everything we need." The voice moved around our tent as the person talked. We could hear footsteps in the leaves, stopping at different points around our campsite. "The girl first, I think. She's smaller." "What?" "No, I don't think they heard us." That's when I realized what was wrong with the conversation. The pauses were too long. Normal conversation has quick back and forth, but this guy was leaving 15 or 20-second gaps between his responses, like he was listening to really long statements from whoever he was talking to. The voice moved away from our tent toward the woods, but we could still hear fragments of the conversation. "Bring the truck down tomorrow morning. Nobody comes through here." Perfect spot. Sarah was shaking next to me. I wanted to comfort her, but I was just as terrified. We were 6 miles from the nearest road, no cell service, and someone was apparently planning to hurt us. We lay there for what felt like hours, listening. The voice came back several times, always having the same kind of one-sided conversation, but something about it started bothering me beyond just the words themselves. Around 3 a.m., I figured out what was wrong. The voice never got tired or hoarse. In 4 hours of talking, there was no change in tone or volume. It was exactly the same every time we heard it. I whispered this observation to Sarah. She'd noticed something else. The footsteps didn't match the voice. When the person was supposedly standing right next to our tent, the footsteps sounded like they were coming from 50 feet away. It's like the voice and the footsteps are two different people. She breathed. We made a decision. We were going to pack up and leave, even though it meant hiking in the dark. Anything was better than staying there until morning. We quietly rolled up our sleeping bags and stuffed them into our backpacks. When we unzipped the tent to crawl out, the talking stopped immediately. The campsite looked normal. Our cold fire pit. Our food hung in a tree to keep it away from bears, our water bottles where we'd left them. But something felt wrong. We grabbed our gear and started hiking toward the main trail by flashlight. After about a mile, Sarah stopped. "Do you hear that?" she asked. I listened. From behind us, back toward our abandoned campsite, came the sound of that same voice, having the same conversation we'd been listening to all night. "Yeah, I see them. 2 of them. They're asleep, I think." We ran the remaining 5 miles to the car and drove straight home. Never went back for our tent or the gear we left behind. Later, I called the Forest Service to report the incident. The ranger I spoke with was quiet for a long time after I told the story. "You're not the first people to report something like this in that area," he finally said. "But we've never found any evidence of anyone camping illegally or threatening other campers." "So what do you think it was?" I asked. "Honestly, I think you should find somewhere else to camp." Story 6. The Mining Road. It takes place in Pennsylvania, in the Allegheny National Forest. This was just last summer, 2024, and it's the reason I'm seriously considering giving up camping altogether. I was driving to a campground near the Kinzua Dam when my GPS took me down what it claimed was a shortcut. Instead of staying on the main highway, it directed me onto a narrow gravel road that wound deeper into the mountains. The road seemed legitimate at first, well-maintained gravel, proper yellow lines painted down the middle. But after about 10 miles, it started getting rougher. Potholes, loose rocks, branches hanging low over the roadway. I should have turned around, but my GPS kept insisting this was the fastest route, and I was running late. Had promised my buddy Mike I'd meet him at the campground before dark. After another 5 miles, the road got weird, really weird. First, I noticed the trees. They were all exactly the same height, planted in perfect rows like someone had turned a forest into a grid. No undergrowth, no fallen logs, no natural variation at all. Then I saw the signs, metal placards every few hundred feet, all with numbers but no words. 47, 52, 61. The numbers didn't follow any pattern I could figure out. Around sunset, I came to a fork in the road. My GPS screen went blank. No signal, no directions, just a gray screen. Both paths looked identical, disappearing into the geometric forest. I chose the left fork and kept driving. That's when I started seeing the buildings. They were set back from the road, maybe 100 feet into the trees. Old industrial structures, concrete blocks with no windows, rusty metal doors, smokestacks that hadn't been used in decades. Each building had a number painted on the side in white letters. Building 23, Building 31, Building 44. Some kind of abandoned mining operation, I figured. Pennsylvania has hundreds of them scattered through the mountains. But these buildings weren't abandoned. There were vehicles parked outside, pickup trucks, work vans, even a few cars that looked like they belonged to office workers. And lights were on inside some of the windowless structures. I slowed down to get a better look at one of the buildings. Through an open door, I could see people in white coveralls moving around inside. They looked like they were working, but I couldn't tell what they were doing. One of them noticed my car and walked to the doorway. Even from a distance, I could tell something was wrong with the way he moved. Too stiff, too mechanical, like someone learning to walk. He raised his hand and waved at me. A normal, friendly wave. But he held his arm up for too long, maybe 30 seconds of continuous waving as I drove past. No change in expression, no other movement. I sped up. The road kept going for another few miles, more numbered buildings, more people in white coveralls. but now they were all standing in the doorways of their buildings, watching my car drive past, all waving the same mechanical wave. By the time I reached the end of the industrial area, there must have been 50 people standing outside their buildings, all watching me, all waving. The road finally connected with a highway I recognized. I drove straight to the campground, trying to shake off what I'd seen. Mike was already there, setting up his tent. "You're 2 hours late," he said. "What happened?" I told him about the GPS taking me down the mining road. He looked confused. "There's no mining operation between here and where you came from," he said. "This whole area is protected forest, has been for 30 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about those people in coveralls bothered me beyond just their weird behavior. I kept thinking about their faces, or what I'd been able to see of them from the car. The next morning, I drove back to find the fork in the road where my GPS had lost signal. I wanted to take pictures, maybe ask someone what kind of operation they were running. I found the spot where I'd turned off the highway, but there was no gravel road. Just a wall of trees and a sign that read, "Private property, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted." I walked into the woods where the road should have been. After about 50 feet, I found concrete foundations and old machinery, all covered in decades of rust and overgrowth. Whatever had been there was abandoned long ago, but I also found tire tracks, fresh ones, leading from the highway into the woods and disappearing into areas where no road existed. I don't know what I saw that night, but I know it was real. And I know those people in coveralls were waiting for something. I think they were waiting for drivers like me, who get lost and end up on roads that shouldn't exist. 6 stories from the Appalachian Mountains. 6 encounters that changed how I think about the wilderness and the things that hide in it. After hearing all of that, can you honestly say you'd feel safe camping alone in those mountains? Because I can't. Every time I set up my tent now, I wonder what's watching from the trees. Every strange sound makes me question whether I'm truly alone. The Appalachians have been home to people for thousands of years, but not all of them have chosen to be part of the world we know. Some have gone so far off the grid that they've become something else entirely. Drop your own camping horror story in the comments. I read every single one, and I might feature yours in the next video. Which of these 6 stories messed with your head the most? The watcher at the cabin? The parallel trail? The mining road that shouldn't exist? And remember, if you're planning a camping trip in the Appalachians, maybe bring a friend. You never know who might be waiting in the woods.